good evening. Here's top news newsletter starting with headlines. Syrian army recaptures territory north of Aleppo. Former Japanese ambassador to Syria, West played negative role in deepening crisis. Netanyahu vows to fight Palestinian UN bid. Gunman takes hostages in Sydney cafe, displays black jihadist flag. Syrian army seized the area of north of Aleppo and killed terrorist militants as fierce battles raged over the strategic territory. Syria's second city is at the heart of clashes between the Syrian army and a range of militants, including Al-Qaeda wing Islamic brigades and Western-backed terrorist groups. The United Nations Syria envoy de Mistura is seeking a local ceasefire in Aleppo to allow badly needed humanitarian assistance into the city. The Syrian army captured an area east of Al-Malah farms outside Aleppo and is now aiming to secure parts in the west and cut off militant supply lines into the city. 34 terrorists from Islamic groups, including Al-Qaeda and Al-Nusra groups, were killed when the Syrian army attacked their positions, and there were also battles south and east of the city. The army was tightening on terrorists in Aleppo after new advances. Former Japanese ambassador to Syria, Masaki Kontida, stressed that Western countries played a role in deepening the crisis in Syria by forming political opposition and terrorist groups, as well as imposing sanctions on Syria, blaming the media for being responsible for the crisis through its negative role in this regard. He added that international parties proceeded to intervene in the crisis in Syria according to their interests, giving no consideration to the principles of international law by interference in the affairs of nations, adding that the UN bear responsibility for that. He assures about the weakness and discretion of the Syria political opposition. Ambassador Kontida has noticed that President Bashar al-Assad encouraged various Syrian social strata to participate in the political and economic reform processes and work to achieve the principle of equal opportunities for all citizens, but the crisis came to indicate sedition. It's useless for Washington to try to pressure Moscow on the world arena. Instead, it should take into account the other side's interests, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov told U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry as the two officials met in Rome. He stressed that their development is possible only on the basis of quality and mutual interests, while any attempts to pressure Russia have no prospect. Lavrov stressed in the importance of adhering the Minsk agreement in view of the situation on the southeastern Ukraine. Other topics discussed including the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the situation in Syria, and Iran's nuclear program. Kerry and Lavrov met yesterday at the residence of the American ambassador in Rome, marking their 17th meeting this year. In Palestinian view, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has vowed to fend off any attempts to dictate unilateral moves, referring to a Palestinian UN proposal that sets a timetable for an Israeli withdrawal to the pre-1967 lines. The Palestinian leadership said it planned to submit a resolution to the UN Security Council, setting a 2-year deadline for Israel to end its occupation. AFP reported. A draft UN resolution will be presented Wednesday on ending the Israeli occupation by the late 2016, Senior Palestine Liberation Organization member Wasil Abu Yusuf said. A police operation is underway at a cafe in central Sydney where up to 40 hostages are being held by an armed attacker and a black flag with inscription can be seen. Australia is contributing to the US-led operation against the so-called Islamic State. As the siege was about to enter its 6th hour, at least 5 people apparently escaped from the building. Live footage showed heavily armed police regrouping near the cafe's door, but not entering it. The area surrounding the cafe has been sealed off by police, and Australian authorities have cleared the airbase over central Sydney to make way for police helicopters. Meanwhile, live TV photo shows showed people standing inside the cafe with their hands pressed against the windows. At least one attacker was caught on camera wearing a traditional Islamic cap. That's all for today. Thanks for joining us. I'm Nibal Hnedi. Good night.